Hello and welcome to episode 73 of the Wisdom from the Akasha podcast. My name is Suzie. I am your host and I'm an Akashic Records teacher and practitioner. This week I'm going to be answering another listener's question. This one came from the comments in the podcast, so you can either submit a question or a topic via the podcast page over on my website, which I'll put in the show notes link below, or you can just leave a comment or a question in the podcast. And if I feel that the question requires a podcast episode for the answer, this is what we'll do. For those of you who haven't worked with me before, haven't come to a workshop or done any training with me, one of the things about me is that I absolutely love to receive questions because I think questions are a great way to really explore topics in a really deep way. So please feel free to send me any questions that you have. There is no such thing as a stupid question. Everybody who is on the spiritual journey is learning, growing, evolving. So all questions are welcome. Thank you to the listener who left this question. And I want to get into the topic in quite a deep way today so that I make sure that I'm answering fully. This question was raised in respect of my false light episode. If you haven't listened to that one already, do check it out. It's a very important topic for this time. And I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And this is about that some people say doubt is the foremost block on your spiritual journey. And can you actually do self-examination without doubt? Can you do this practice of self-reflection, self-observation without having some form of doubt? And I want to get into this topic in quite a deep way now. So there are two parts to this answer. Okay. And the first part about this is people's opinion that doubt is the foremost block. Okay. And I ask you to consider a couple of things in respect to how true this statement is. So the first thing to consider is this idea that doubt is the biggest block on your spiritual journey can be relevant depending upon where you're at in your spiritual journey. What I mean by that is at certain stages in your spiritual development journey, having doubt, questioning things is actually very healthy. Okay, so if you listen to my episode on the false light, my episode on the astral realm, both of which I'll link in the show notes below, you can see that when you're at the astral level of initiation and you're going through the astral realm, those astral planes, it's actually a very helpful thing to have doubt, to question things, to have your questioning self active, because the whole point of that realm and that level of initiation is to be able to feel into resonance and discernment, a topic I've talked about a lot on the podcast. So is doubt the foremost block when you're going through the astral level of initiation? Not at all. Having doubts, having questions, having concerns is a good thing. It's a healthy thing. Now, when it comes to moving into surrender and trying to practice surrender, or when you're working with developing your intuition, this is where doubt can start to become problematic. So it's completely okay to have doubts, but there is a trusting, there is a surrendering into that's also necessary. So ultimately, how important doubt is and how much of a block it is going to be dependent upon where you're at in your own spiritual journey. Sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's a hindrance. I also want you to think about how strong your connection is to that internal technology, to that discernment, to that resonance. How loud is that internal technology indicating to you that something is true and something is false? How much is it guiding you and how much are you listening and acting upon it? Okay? Because you want to make sure that whilst you're still working on that developing of that internal technology, strengthening that intuition so that you can get to that point where you can trust it completely, it's okay to have doubts. But again, it's that fine balance because there will come a point where you have to start trusting it. You have to start taking the actions in alignment to that internal technology. And then doubt can become a hindrance. So if you're at the stage of your spiritual development where it's now time to trust and it's now time to take action on your intuition, then yes, doubt is going to be a problem. If you're still working on that, if you're still working on your connection to that internal technology and you're not quite sure yet, then it's okay to doubt and it's okay to question things. The third thing I'd like to say in respect of this part of this answer is, for me personally, when I look at people's spiritual development, when I've worked with people, I actually think there are three kind of bigger problems that we have at this time. So the first one, absolutely, is fear. I think fear is a much bigger block to someone's spiritual development than anything else. Okay. I will also link in the show notes an episode I did on the nervous system and the root chakra, because what you'll see in that episode is the energy of fear is going to destabilize that root chakra, that nervous system, and you can't do anything if your nervous system is dysregulated. Any techniques, any work that you do in respect of your spiritual development, in respect of going into higher consciousness, opening up and operating through those higher chakras, requires you first to have a good, solid nervous system, requires you to have a good, solid, balanced root chakra. And fear is the thing that destabilizes that. So I see that a lot more than people doubting. People do doubt, and that's okay, but I think fear is a bigger block. The second thing I think that is a huge block in our day and age is patience. Okay. And this is because we are a generation of quick fixes. We love a quick fix. We don't want to do the work. We don't want to take time with things. We want everything to happen now. And it's just a consequence of how our lifestyles are and how we've evolved as a society. But one thing is for sure, spiritual development takes time. Regardless of what tradition, path, practice you're working with, you will see that there has always been an understanding that it's going to take time. It's going to take time to let go of things. It's going to take time to heal things. It's going to take time to get the monkey mind under control, whatever it is that you're working on. And we're just not very good at patience. Okay. The third thing that I think is, again, more impactful than doubt at this time in respect of people's spiritual development is overconsumption of information. Okay. We love to consume information, and there's nothing wrong with that to a certain degree. I understand I'm giving you information here and you're consuming it in the podcast, but there comes a point where people are over consuming information and not doing any practice. They're not actually taking the time to take the information in and then do something with it. They're not taking the information in and reflecting upon it, meditating upon it, seeing how these practices that they've read about and watched YouTube videos about and listened to podcast episodes about, how they actually work. And this is very important as well. So I think those three things, fear, patience, and overconsumption of information, are actually more of a problem at our time for most people on the spiritual journey based on my work with people over the years. What I think is worth noting is that self-examination, self-reflection, self-observation, they're all really good spiritual practices on that way to knowing thyself. Okay? It's important that we do understand ourselves from all of the different angles, because you can't know yourself if you haven't observed yourself, if you haven't paid attention to how you are showing up. But as with all things, we can overdo this process. We can overdo the self-observation, the self-reflection. And I see this with people where it's like they've done so much work, so much healing, so much expansion, but they seem to still be poking around for something else to heal when nothing else is coming up in their life. It's like they've become addicted to this process of healing and uncovering the onion layers. This you'll see when you're being called to shift from those indirect practices, so those practices that are going to help you heal and help you move past things and let go, and moving more towards the direct practices, so abiding in the awe of your existence, practicing your connection to unconditional love and Christ consciousness. So what I would say is that if nothing is coming up for you, so if your life is, ticking along nice and smoothly and you're thinking, okay, but I'm not where I want to be yet from a spiritual development perspective, rather than thinking, okay, I need to find something else to heal. I need to find something else to let go of, because trust me, life is going to bring you everything that you need. It's going to bring you all the situations so that you know what still needs to be healed and released and let go of. Rather than doing that, What I would recommend is that you then go, okay, well, there's nothing coming up for me to heal, but how connected am I to unconditional love? How connected am I to the Christ consciousness that is within me? How connected am I to the absolute awe of my existence? And introduce some of those practices. When you have that experience of how loved, supported, and guided you are on this journey and being in those frequencies, you're going to be able to surrender much easier. Surrender is not an easy thing to do. And a lot of the time people promote this idea of surrendering, not taking into consideration the fact that if you have experienced a lot of trauma, you've got a very dysregulated nervous system, you've got a lot of stuff going on, surrendering is not an easy thing to do. It's not easy to then put your trust into your higher self, God, source, the universe, whatever you want to refer to as a higher form of consciousness. So by spending some time in those direct practices, by being in that energy that those direct practices offer, you're going to find it much easier to surrender. And I just want to have a one last note here before I close out this episode, is please remember that no true guide, okay, so no energy being that you're working with is ever going to mind you having doubt, questioning things, trying to understand things better, okay? If you ever come across a guide who has a problem with that, I would recommend that you disconnect from that energy and you connect to an energy that doesn't mind. One of the things I will always say to my students in my training is ask the Akashic Records anything. Okay, it doesn't mean you're going to get an answer to everything, but don't limit yourself in respect of the questions. The guides in the Akashic Records, they're never going to get annoyed with you. They're never going to get mad with the fact that you're asking more and more questions. It's never a case of, okay, you've had your time today, go away. They don't mind. Okay, and that's true for guides, whether it's the Akashic Records guides or any of your other guides. So please don't feel like questioning and doubting is necessarily a bad thing, but it can become a hindrance. So I know this is quite a long answer to the question, so I do hope the listener who posted the question doesn't mind me going into it, but I think that we needed to just have this bigger conversation around this topic, because I think a lot of the time what happens is these blanket statements are made and we don't look into the nuance and where other issues come in. And that's very important because you're all individual and unique going through your spiritual journey individually and uniquely. I hope that you have found this episode helpful, and I look forward to seeing you next week for the next episode.